In our last lecture module, we finished our discussion of gnomic covariation. That was the first of two theories based upon use, that is, how a state gets used, that we're going to look at. Gnomic covariation focused on a single use, the tokening of that state by some object, property, event, or relation out in the world. Functional role semantics is our second use theory. Functional role semantics has a wider scope. Functional role semantics tells us that a mental state will represent an object, a property, an event, or relation in virtue of the causal relations, often called inferential roles or epistemic liaisons, that state has with other mental states and or the world. So if we have that triangle for Homer, and it causes a state inside Homer, that state can be assigned a particular content. So here we have ST in the top right-hand slot. It has the representational content of triangle, not just because it was caused by a triangle, but because it was caused by a triangle, it interacts with other mental states, and it causes Homer to say something like triangle. Now, functional role semantics will define a mental state, ST, as representing a triangle if and only if ST has all the necessary and sufficient causal or functional relationships with other states and or triangles. Now, there are two different varieties of functional role semantics. Narrow functional role semantics focuses in on just the relationships between other states. Doesn't include what causes that state, doesn't include what behaviors that state generates. It just focuses in on the mental states. That's narrow functional role semantics. So if you're wondering, well, what would count then on a narrow version of functional role semantics, in virtue of which that state ST was assigned the content of triangle? Well, since we probably don't have a lot of hopes or dreams or fears or desires related to triangles, in this case it would probably be primarily other beliefs that we had. And those beliefs would include things like it's an enclosed planar figure, it's three-sided, the interior angles all add to 180 degrees, it can be obtuse, acute, or equilateral, just the sort of basic facts that you might expect someone to believe if they knew what triangles were. Wide functional role semantics can include things that cause the state, the relationships between states, and the thing that the state causes. So on wide functional role semantics, we might well include those sorts of beliefs that I just mentioned for narrow functional role semantics. It's the three-sided figure, it's enclosed, the interior angles all add to 180 degrees. But we would also likely include typical causes of that state, so our ability to recognize triangles, and typical behaviors that that state causes. So, for example, our ability to name triangles as triangles. Oh, there's a triangle. Or perhaps our ability to draw triangles. Things of that nature, so that we would get potentially inputs, relationships to other mental states, and then outputs, behaviors that state also generated. So the last thing that you might wonder is, well, is there anything that recommends functional role semantics over, say, gnomic covariation or even a similarity view? Are there things from cognitive science or psychology or so on that point to functional role semantics? If you're a wide functional role semanticist, then all that material from gnomic covariation, all of that material also seems to support your view. In addition to that, you can point to studies having to do with the structure of concepts, conceptual change through development, so developmental psychology, regular cognitive psychology. You could also point to anthropology. So when anthropologists go out and try and study different cultures out in the world, they adopt a principle of charity, an assumption that however they assign meaning to the actions, the language, the beliefs, and so on of some culture that they're studying, that assignment has to respect that principle of charity, that assumption that their beliefs beliefs and desires and so on will be a coherent, reasonably rational collection. Now, in addition to this evidential and methodological set of reasons why one might think functional role semantics is the correct theory of mental representation, functional role semanticists will often cite certain advantages that they think their theory has over, for instance, nomic covariation. One advantage that you often see cited is the claim that functional role semantics has a single means of assigning content to mental states. That is, nomic covariation would assign content to relatively low-level features using nomic covariation. But when we get to things like 4x4s and air conditioners and televisions, all of those mental states representing those properties, they would have to be assigned content via some sort of definition in terms of the previously assigned lower-level functional features. Functional role semanticists will claim, hey, we don't need to do that. And so we have a better account of how to assign content. Another advantage that is often claimed by functional role semanticists is that functional role semantics allows for the assumption of rationality and the constraint that what people believe has an impact on what they're actually representing. So here they would say things like functional role accounts seem to allow for the effects of belief change, so that if you develop your notion of what it is to be, say, an animal or a mammal as you get older, then we have a means of assigning a change in meaning corresponding to that change in beliefs that you develop as you develop a new concept. Similarly, when you're making inferences or you hold a set of beliefs about some topic, those beliefs seem to be constrained by reason. That is, you can't believe, for example, that you are, the country of Russia, or that purple is a sound without people thinking, I think maybe you don't understand what the country of Russia is, or you don't have a very good understanding of purple or the understanding that we have of purple. So functional role semanticists think that their view has these advantages because it explains these sorts of features of mental representation easily and naturally within their framework.